Good afternoon. My name is Scott Hicks. I'm Director of the Teaching and Learning Center at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. For today's celebration of teaching and learning, I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. James Hudson, Assistant Professor of History. Dr. Hudson, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks. Good to be here.
My first question is this: who's the best teacher or teachers you've ever had and why?
Oh, that's a tough question, Scott. As we were talking about, there's so many people in my life that have made such a difference. The first I want to mention are people in my family. My mother, um, who was a teacher herself, a public school teacher for many years, instilled in me a love for history. My paternal grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. E.C. Hudson of Earth, Texas. Um, my grandfather, E.C. Hudson, had a very strong work ethic. He had this big landscaping operation in his house in the South Plains of Texas, and I spent summers as a kid working for him. And he was very meticulous, and he had ways that he wanted things done, and he would explain them to you. Like, okay, boy, because he called you boy. Hey, boy, I want you to do this task like this. This is how you do this. This is how you hoe weeds, boy. And so, I mean, I did all kinds of stuff for him. Uh, and then just so many different teachers that I had in elementary school, middle school, high school. I remember the time that I spent going to public schools in Denison, Texas as a kid. Some of the teachers I had there were outstanding. Mrs. Banfield, Mrs. Cameron, Mrs. Murphy. Um, and this is back in the day, and that level of school where you could get paddled in the classroom, and all those teachers had a paddle behind their desk, and they would dispense justice, and you didn't want to mess around with them. Um, Mrs. Williams, our choir teacher there, was also a great lady. Um, and in sixth grade, I moved around a lot as a kid. uh, in sixth grade, I was in public schools in Amarillo, Texas, and Sleepy Hollow Elementary. See, as a kid growing up, I went by my middle name, Josh Hudson. So that's how people know me who might be listening, see if it's the same person. But I was kind of rambunctious the couple of years that I was going to school there, and I gave some teachers some fits there, and I feel kind of bad about that. Mrs. Saunders, Mrs. Phillips, our choir teacher. I had a math teacher there named Carl Carlisle. He was an outstanding teacher, really great guy. And then moving up into middle school, junior high, one of my history teachers, Tina O'Connor, who was actually friends with my mother. Um, some of the football coaches I had as a kid, Coach Randy Boyd, um, Coach Ayers, Coach Phelps. He was one of my history teachers in high school. He was a great history teacher, just really rambunctious and just animated and totally into it. And he just was very enthralling for a high schooler. And then uh, some of my other high school teachers, I had some theater teachers that were great. Emily John, Jimmy Smith, Jackie Contreras, uh, Miss Vernon, my English teacher at Levelland High School, where I went to high school. Trying to think who else. Miss Bauckham, I had this English teacher as a sophomore. Miss Newberry, Miss Loretta Ray, they taught science. Um, Trying to think of who else there. Oh, Kim Locke, Kim or Giles. She's one of my math teachers. She was great. Um, and I was not an easy student to deal with. And I've always, that's something I always talk about to my students is, um, I was disinterested. I was, hard to handle. I didn't focus. Um, and these are all kind of issues that I see students struggling with today. And I think it makes me it humbles me. It's very humbling, you know. Uh, and then, so I finished high school, I joined the Marine Corps, and I didn't have teachers necessarily there, but I had drill instructors, and basic training. Every Marine remembers the name of his drill instructors. Senior drill instructor, Staff Sergeant Lowry, Sergeant Anderson, Sergeant Calderon, Sergeant Luthi. I mean, they were, in terms of Marines, they were some of the most outstanding people I've ever seen. In the regular Marine Corps, I had a section leader named Corporal Travis. He's a sergeant major now. He was outstanding. Our tank leader, Top Segura. A couple of platoon sergeants I had, Sergeant Herberts, Staff Sergeant Slickenmeyer. I mean, they were great. And then, and gosh, there's just so many. When I was an undergrad at Pepperdine, Richard Hughes, Tom Riley, very important people in my life, because Dr. Riley at Pepperdine, he's one of these teachers that every student wants. Instilled in me a love for China. I had some other great teachers at Pepperdine, Dr. Ron Tyler in religion, Dr. Gibson, I think, in philosophy. Um, Trying to think who else. I guess it's enough for undergrad, but grad school, my advisor, Huayan Lee from the University of Texas in the Department of History, great man, great scholar, great advisor. I was really lucky to have him. He's one of the prominent scholars in my field. I was really lucky to study under him. Some of the other people at Texas, Kamran Ali in anthropology, he was a great teacher. He was really great at meeting students where they were at. Because I had a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainties and didn't understand a lot of things. And Kamran, that's what everybody calls him. Kamran was just so patient with all of us. I took this class with him and a bunch of other anthropology people there, social core. Rob Oppenheim at Texas. Oh, and all the teachers that have taught me Chinese, the language that I learned that has shaped my study of Chinese history at Texas, Xie Lao Shi, Deng Lao Shi, all the teachers that I had in China. Um, the director of the CET program in Harbin, Ren Laosher, she's an outstanding lady. So many people. So I'm sorry if anybody's listening to this and I left you out, but um, yeah, I mean, I'm a you know, as Hillary Clinton said, it takes a village to make the teacher, I guess. So those are people that had a really big impact on me.
It's a true statement. What does it take to be a good professor in higher education in 2021?
Um, I think you kind of have to be in the Chinese tradition, sort of a Taoist. You have to be flexible, moldable, bendable, um, willing to take on new platforms and new types of pedagogies. I never would have imagined a year ago that I would be teaching like this, online. I was always fully resistant to teaching remotely or online courses or distance courses because I wanted to be interacting with students in the classroom. But it's like many of us, it's forced me to embrace um, these new kind of avenues and platforms. Uh, and I just think you have to have a good sense of what works and what doesn't. Um, and I constantly make changes to my classes, to my syllabi, to the readings I assign as a history teacher, trying to make them better, trying to make them more relatable to students, more accessible. But you also have to, I think, set high standards and you have to expect a lot out of students. And my predecessors here in the history department at UNC Pembroke, Dr. Weston Cook, famously said, sooner or later, the student has to do something. And so we can extend the olive branch, we can accommodate, till the cows come home, but the student has to do the work and put the effort in and try and struggle. And I don't think that there's any problem with there's no shame in or any uh if a student's having a hard time, it should not be a reflection of that they're a bad person, that they're a bad student. It's just it's part of learning. Some students take longer to learn things than others. When I was a kid having a hard time with math, I just found that I had to really, really focus and be disciplined and spend more hours, within, one person that helped me with math as a kid was actually my stepmother, Evelyn Hudson. I remember she sat me down at the kitchen table one day and just sort of explained fractions to me. Um, but I think you also have to be patient, and it's a humbling thing because I told you, I mean, I was not an easy kid I was not an easy student. I think even in grad school, I wasn't the best student. I was a terrible student. Um, I think by the time I got to a certain age, I think I wanted to be the center of attention, and kind of, I don't know, was maybe subconsciously jealous of my teachers. I don't know. Anyway, I hope that answers, it's a big enough answer for you.
That's a wonderful answer. Tell us a story about something you do that's creative to engage your students.
Oh man, Scott, why are you asking me these difficult questions? Something creative that I do to engage my students. Um, Another teacher that I had at the University of Texas, H.W. Brands, Bill Brands, he's a historian of the U.S. presidency and um, prolific, author of many, many books on U.S. history, on the presidency, and he's on the History Channel a lot. And I think that he's not. I mean, I don't know. He may not be as appreciated in that department enough because he's more of a popular historian. Um, but I mean, he's this type of guy that he could just. I once had I was a TA for a class of his on U.S. foreign policy since 1914. It was 3 hours once a week, and the guy talked the entire time. He did not stop. It was in an auditorium of like 350 people, and he talked off script the entire time. It was amazing. I mean, he's just an amazing storyteller. So you got to tell stories. You got to be a good storyteller. Um, my father, who I didn't mention earlier, my father was one of the great all-time storytellers. I mean, he would tell these stories about, his time growing up or his time in high school or playing college football at Texas Tech or his time in Vietnam. And they're often done with humor. And he would have us like rolling in stitches. Um, so telling funny stories, and I think I find with students, you got to be able to tell funny stories about yourself. And that's what so Bill Brands used to say, going back to him, he used to say, if you want to gain students' attention, do two things. Tell funny stories about yourself and talk about sex. And then I guess I have a caveat on that, which is like they, you probably shouldn't combine those two things. Um, but if you tell a funny story about yourself, if you make students laugh, then you got them. But sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes my jokes don't land. Um, or if I'm teaching three sections of world history, sometimes the joke will land with one section, but then it'll bomb with another section. It just really depends on your room and your audience. So I would just say tell funny stories, um, and then talk about sex like in the context of history. Uh, um, how many wives such and such king or such and such emperor had, or the fact that women rulers throughout history aren't portrayed have not been portrayed fairly because of their gender, because of their sex. um, things like that. So,
Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Hudson.
no problem.